everybody, and welcome back to another episode as we journey down the road to somewhere. And again, if you might be joining us maybe for the first time, what we're doing is we're taking a trip down Route 66 and through the books of the Bible, and based really on my latest book, The Road to Somewhere. And we're in episode 6 of season 2. Season 2 is going through the state of Missouri and also through the history books of the Old Testament. And episode 6, I'm calling The World's Richest Man, and we'll see what that's all about a little bit here. By the way, who do you think is currently the world's richest man? And I have to tell you that right at this very moment, it all depends on what's happening in the stock market, because on any given day, it might be Elon Musk, it might be Jeff Bezos, might be Mark Zuckerberg, might be Bill Gates, and again, it all depends on what their stock is doing, so it shifts around quite a bit. But back at the time that we're going to be looking at today, there was only one man that was the richest man in the world, and we'll be looking a bit at his life today. So again, we're in the state of Missouri here in in season 2, and there are 12 stops in the state of Missouri on Route 66, 12 books that we'll be going through, and today is our 6th episode. And if you haven't listened in before, because there are 12 stops, what we're doing is we're going through 6 and taking a little bit of a break during the Easter season here, and then we will be back with the second 6 stops and 6 books of history. Probably will begin mid-April, which will take us then through the end of May, and we'll probably break for the summer again. So this is our last episode here for a while, and we'll look at where we are and what book we're looking at. So remember, John and Joy are 2 main characters in the book, The Road to Somewhere. They were last in Rolla, Missouri. And from Rolla, remember, that was the home of the little mini Stonehenge, and they shot their video in front of that. And so they head out again on Route 66, and they're going to go about another 26 miles, not too far down the road. Actually, a little further than that. The town that we're told that we're going to is Arlington, and again, its dot on the map is underneath it. Just again, it can be kind of confusing looking at the map and where the dots are there. But Arlington is actually past Rolla. So Arlington, we're going to go a little bit past that, and we're going to look at the remains of what once was called the Stony Dell Resort. This was a major stop. And by the way, Arlington, I think this is the only building. It's now a ghost town. I do think that still that this one spot might be open on the road, but when we go past it, we'll come to where Stony Dell Resort was. And this picture, which obviously, if you look at the cars, goes all the way back to probably the 30s, was a time when this was, for many people, a major stop on Route 66. It was just down the road or up the road from Fort Leonard Wood, a major military base, and it was a place that was visited both by soldiers from Fort Leonard Wood and many people that were driving along Route 66, including a lot of celebrities. I was just thinking how back, particularly in the late 20s, 30s, 40s, when cars didn't have air conditioning. I can imagine driving Route 66 in the summertime and just being sort of hot and sweaty, and all of a sudden you come upon Stony Dell Resort that had this spring-fed, stone-made swimming pool, and this would have been a great place to stop. Unfortunately, and by the way, it was so busy that they had to have a traffic cop that was out there directing traffic on Route 66, so many cars coming in and out of Stony Dell. Again, unfortunately, if you go there today, I think this is another picture of some bathing beauties there back in the 30s or the 40s, whatever, at Stony Dell. If you go by there today, this is basically all that remains of that resort. A few of the stone buildings, little pieces of it too. And what happened is really that this was one of those towns, along with Arlington, by the way. When I-44, the interstate, came through, they bypassed a few of these towns on Route 66, and the result was that many of them became ghost towns, and Stony Dell Resort basically became sort of a ghost resort, I guess you could say. So in the book, this is where John and Joy decide they're going to shoot their little video. And so they set up, they get ready to go, and you might remember, if you've read the book or if you haven't, that as they begin to shoot their little video, which tells a little bit about the place they're at on Route 66 and then gives a teaser to one of the books of the Bible that they hope then will send their audience to the longer video of the actual book. But in the book, when John starts his little, bit that they're filming, his first line is, "Today we are nowhere." And basically, he goes on then to tell the story of Stony Dell and what it used to be, and how basically, again, it has just become sort of a ghost resort. No longer has that spring-fed stone swimming pool. And he tells a little bit in the book of the story how the interstate bypassed it, and again, that was why it's a bit of a rundown ghost town. And then it provides sort of a segue into the book of the Bible that goes along with this stop, and that book is 1 Kings. And so John will transition over to a brief teaser on 1 Kings. Now, again, remember, the ultimate objective in the book, and actually in what we're doing, is to give enough of a teaser that people would want to then go to the longer video that gives an overview of the whole book, and you have a link to that, so we'll talk a little bit about that later. Joy actually, prior to shooting the video, has suggested to John that that this could be a bit of a metaphor. The fact that Stony Dell, no longer exists, and that it has been sort of wiped out by the interstate coming through. But it can be a bit of a metaphor for what happens in 1 Kings. There are two major stories in the book of 1 Kings. And by the way, I think as we get into Kings and Chronicles, and maybe even Samuel, 1 and 2 Samuel, I think we're getting into an area of the Old Testament that a lot of people are really not very familiar with. And so again, you'll get a little bit of an overview, and hopefully it will motivate you to find out more. Two major stories in this one book, and the first of those has to do with Solomon, and the second we're calling the split, and you'll see what that means when we move on here just in a little bit. But it begins really with the story of Solomon, and of course Solomon was the product of David and Bathsheba's marriage after the adultery and the death of the child that was born because of that adultery, they had another son. His name was Solomon. And Solomon becomes not only the third king of the United Kingdom, so Saul, David, Solomon are the three kings of the United Kingdom, but he also became the richest and wisest man in the world. And it's a great story. Again, I'd encourage you to watch the First Kings video because I go into a little bit more detail on it. But basically, Solomon is made an offer by God when he comes to this point as an adult and takes over after David's death as the king. And God asks him, "What do you want me to do for you?" I imagine, kind of a funny or a fun exercise is how would you answer that request if God were to, say, "I'm going to do anything you ask me to. What do you want me to do for you?" And Solomon, his response is a little bit surprising perhaps, because he asks God for wisdom that will enable him to govern this kingdom of Israel wisely. And God's pleased that that's what he asks for. And in response, God says, "Not only will I give you wisdom, but because you haven't even asked for long life or riches, I'm going to give you those also." And so consequently, Solomon in his day becomes known really almost worldwide in his world as the most wise man that lived or lives at that time, and many came to him for counsel because of his wisdom, but he also became the richest man in the world. And again, in the video, you get quite a bit more information on that. I was trying to think because if you take the top 4 wealthiest men in the world today and added them together, Solomon would still have been wealthier than all 4 of those combined. So he just had tremendous wealth. There is again a link in that First King video, and how all that happens, really a great story. A couple of things about Solomon that I just wanted to point out, and I think that John does in his little teaser also. One is that after he's been given this gift of wisdom, we're given a story that might be one of the more well-known stories, actually, about the life of Solomon, and that has to do with the fact that 2 prostitutes come to him. They have both had babies, but one of the babies died, and both women are claiming that the living baby is theirs, and that one says, "Well, the other prostitute stole my baby in the middle of the night," and the other prostitute says, "No, this is my baby." And so they come to King Solomon for a wise decision, and Solomon says, "Well, I've got an easy solution for that. We just cut the baby in half, and each of you get half." Well, one of the prostitutes responds to that very enthusiastically, thinking that's a great idea. And of course, the other prostitute says, no, don't do that. I don't want my baby to die, which immediately tells you which of the 2 are actually the mother. And of course, then Solomon awards the baby to the one that said, "No, don't do that. I would rather give my baby up than have it, cut in half." So it's an illustration, again, of his wisdom, and pretty kind of a very creative way of dealing with that situation. Also, what he's most perhaps known for biblically is that he becomes the one that builds the temple. So remember, this is a picture of the Jebusite city that then became David's fortress and its name was changed to Jerusalem. And it then up, as you see where the star is, up and to the right there, was the threshing floor of Araunah, which David had bought to be the site where the temple would be built. David wanted to build the temple, and God said, no, because you're a fighting man, you're a man of blood, and I want a man of peace to be the one that builds the temple. So even though David was significantly involved in the design and also in providing the resources, it becomes Solomon who actually builds the temple. And that story of the temple being built, what went into it, how it was dedicated, how God came and actually made his presence known there, is all in that book of 1 Kings. And this is a little bit of a drawing, an artist's conception of what that first temple looked like. Now, kind of a bit of a spoiler, or, a bit of a preview of coming attractions. This first temple is going to be destroyed when the Babylonians lay siege to Jerusalem in 586 BC. And so that, for instance, the temple that Jesus comes to during his lifetime and in the New Testament is actually the second temple that's built after the captivity, and then which King Herod spends 46 years enhancing until it becomes one of the most beautiful buildings in the ancient world. But this gives you a little bit of an idea of what Solomon's temple looked like. So just a couple of highlights from that. One of the other things about Solomon is that he starts out great, much like Saul did, in terms of his obedience to God. But then we're told that over time that Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. It's almost it's hard to imagine that, but during those days there were often political alliances made. So, for instance, one of his first marriages was to the daughter of the Pharaoh of Egypt, in order that Israel and Egypt would then have an alliance together. But he married women that in the law was forbidden to marry from many of the countries that were surrounding ancient Israel. And the problem was that most of them came from environments where they were worshiping these deities that usually involve things like sacred prostitution or child sacrifice, burning children as a sacrifice. And Solomon, we're told, and the text tells us that it was his wives, they led him astray. And actually, this isn't in the book, but it is in the video, because Solomon begins to build temples for these Canaanite deities that were, in a sense, the reason that the Canaanites worshiped them was one of the reasons that God had decided to use Israel to judge those nations and then to give Israel their land. And now the king of Israel is building temples to these foreign deities. And so God says that he is going to rip the kingdom out of Solomon's hands, and that becomes sort of the tragic part of Solomon's end. But God says that because of David, he's still going to give Solomon's descendants a piece of the kingdom, and we'll see how that works itself out. So really what happens then is that the book, the second part of the book, really talks about the split of the United Kingdom, and really how Israel ends up with basically is a civil war after Solomon dies. And the story in the text, and John makes brief mention of this in his video, is that after Solomon dies, his son Rehoboam becomes the king. And what happens is that what we haven't been told is that all of these amazing accomplishments that Solomon achieved during his lifetime oftentimes were created at the expense both of the labor and the taxes of the people of Israel. And so one of the leaders that had actually been sent into exile by the name of Jeroboam comes back and meets with Solomon's son and says to him that the people really need a break from the heavy load that his father Solomon has placed upon them. And so Solomon says, well, let me think about that, come back in 3 days. And in the book of 1 Kings, what Solomon does is he goes to 2 different sets of people to get advice. He goes to sort of the elders of Israel that were the advisors to his dad and says, what do you think I should do? And they all say, you do need to sort of lighten the load here and back off on how much taxation has been placed upon the people. And then he goes to a second group for advice, which are his young friends. And his young friends advise him that what he really needs to do is he needs to put on more pressure on the people and let them know that if they think that his dad made life hard, that under him it's going to be even worse. Well, what ends up happening then is that when the people hear this and when Jeroboam hears this, a split takes place, and 10 of the tribes of the nation of Israel split off from the southern part of the kingdom and form their own nation. That nation now becomes known as Israel, and the southern kingdom, which is comprised of only 2 tribes, the tribe of Judah, again, which the line of David will continue to come through, and the little tribe of Benjamin, along with some Levites. Rehoboam actually wants to go to war against Jeroboam to try and stop this split, and this gives you a little bit of an idea of what that looked like. You can kind of see the territory that now belonged to the 10 tribes to the north, and you can kind of see what the southern kingdom of Judah looked like also. Rehoboam wants to, fight to keep the kingdom together, but God says, don't do it. This is how things are going to be. And so from this point forward, we have 2 kingdoms, and that can be kind of confusing when you're reading the text, because what's going to happen in probably the latter part of 1 Kings and throughout 2 Kings is you're going to see sort of the storyline bounce back and forth from the north to the south, and you'll hear references to Judah, and then you'll hear references to Israel, and understand that we're talking about 2 distinct entities now, a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom. That northern kingdom, just as a spoiler, and we're going to see this in 2 Kings, which is where we will pick up after our break, what we're going to see is that that northern kingdom is only going to last until 722 BC. Now the split takes place right around 930 BC. Solomon has reigned for 40 years, as did his dad before him and Saul before that. In 722 BC, again, spoiler, the northern kingdom is going to be attacked by the empire of the Assyrians, and they're going to wipe out the northern kingdom, so that from 722 BC actually to today there are 10 lost tribes, and the northern kingdom does not exist any longer. The southern kingdom will exist a couple of hundred years more till around 586, And that's at the point in time then when the Babylonian Empire, which has defeated the Assyrian Empire, will lay siege to Jerusalem and eventually destroy the temple and destroy the city. So all of that's yet to come in 2 Kings, which will be part of what we look at when we get back together for the second part of the second season. So Northern Kingdom Israel, Southern Kingdom Judah. John then simply encourages in the book, he encourages his audience to watch that First Kings video. He again kind of tells them that the story, and this is simply a list of the kings of the north and the south. We'll be looking at a couple of those again when we get back together. But he encourages them and telling them that the story of the two kingdoms is contained in the next book, 2 Kings, and brings the video to a close. And he and Joy then prepare to head out to the next stop, which will be Lebanon, Missouri. And that will be the beginning of part 2 of season 2. We'll have 6 more Missouri stops and 6 more books of Old Testament history. So we'll look forward to that coming up when we get back after Easter break. So thanks for watching and tuning in today. Again, my encouragement would be you have a link to 1 Kings. The video on that, and it has a lot more information than what I've just shared with you or what is in the book, because the book is designed to sort of tempt you or tease you to watch that video. So I hope you have a blessed Easter, and we will see you again in mid-April. This gives you a little bit of time to catch up for those of you that haven't been able to kind of keep on track week to week. You can catch up, and you'll be ready to launch into the second half of season 2. So thanks for joining us today, and again, I look forward to being back with you probably in mid-April.